Okay. So, Dave, if you go to the other side, second one. Third. Yeah. So basically, this is the amount that Sri Lanka received to implement RISE project, and $220,000 US. And out of that, we have disbursed only 133 to 65 farm organizations, and all the loans have been production loans. So these are we used 5 SNFOs to implement a RISE project. Out of the 5, one is a women-only organization, which is SANASA, which is the gender mainstreaming organization of SANASA group. The other 4 are SANASA district unions, which are the collectives of cooperative societies in the district basis. So with the 5 SNFOs, we were able to cater to 65 farm organizations. And through the 65 farm organizations, 1,301 farmers received loans from RISE, and this comprised of 962 women and 257 youth, and all of them have borrowed for production purposes. Since most of the RISE disbursements in the initial stages happened during a lockdown period, and the cooperative societies did not have the information related to the farming. They had information about income and other elements of the farmers, but the actual commodity related baselines or data had not been collected. So we are not in a position to provide this specific data. Then if we look at the impact of RISE and looking at the problems that the farmers were facing, 2 biggest issues that were faced by the farmers during the COVID time where RISE was implemented one was finding access to finance in order to continue their agriculture activities. Usually they feed their agriculture activities with the income that they gain from the previous harvest. But because they were unable to sell some of the products, they did not have funds. In addition to that, very few organizations were willing to actually lend because there was quite a lot of uncertainty about the cash flow. And the second one is the breakdown of access to markets, because most of the smallholder farmers go to their nearby markets. These are mostly open fair. And the village level people, some village level person collects, harvest from small holders and go to nearby markets. But most of the open markets had been closed. So the bigger markets did not come to villages with small, harvests. They went to, the bigger farmers to get bulk products in order to cut the travel costs. Therefore, smallholder farmers had serious issues of accessing markets. So these are the 2 things that I think RISE had some impact on. With the RISE loan assistance, we were able to support farmers to get required input for farming. Then farmers were able to do crop diversification. For example, the rice farmers who cultivated and depended purely on rice cultivation, their women in their families were encouraged to do home gardens or short-term crop cultivation. With that, we were able to motivate farmers to go into crop diversification, which ensured household food security. And then farmers were also able to access markets through collective selling, because we were able to provide loans and cluster the farmers into similar kind of production rather than producing anything and everything. We were able to organize their selling. Then farm organizations were also able to start clustering their production for future agribusinesses, because we were able to link rice farmers or the people who benefited from rice into the APFP and FO4A project. So there was more sustainability in the way that they lent. If we look at the impact on women, 74% of the rice beneficiaries were women, and the concerns that were addressed are not very different from the concerns of the smallholder male farmers. But the two issues that were addressed by rice, one is access to finance and markets. The other one is providing new knowledge to diversify the income. The third, what were the roles played by women? Looking at the fact that 74% of the beneficiaries in Sri Lanka from the rice project are women. I mean, it can be concluded that we didn't have to have a major intervention to get the women more involved, considering the fact that the rice loan was quite small. Women had more interest in participating in it also. In addition, farm organizations also focused on providing loans to women because women were looking at the food security and seriously interested in getting some real impact out of the 30,000 that they received. So they are one of the 4 SNFOs, actually 5 SNFOs that participated in lending a rice loan was a women-led organization, which is Uttamavi. That also impacted on the increased number of women. So they basically designed who to give, how to access, how to communicate, then delivering the loan and monitoring the loan. So women were involved in the management, sometimes in the decision making, and also actually benefiting from the program. So all in all, across the program, women were very strongly involved. Youth in Sri Lanka, the participation of youth in the agriculture sector anyway is low. However, we were able to access about 19% of youth through a rice loan. And considering the time frame, of course, there was no major issue or specific concern that rice was specifically addressing to access youth. But SNFOs were advised by ENIA to, pay some strong emphasis to involve youth in the beneficiary list. And then most of the extension officers, on the other hand, in the cooperative societies are young people. So a rice loan was administered by quite a significant number of youth. The impact of household, we were able to stabilize income and household cash flow. Then through the through some of the direct access that NIA was able to find for the farmers, we were able to provide new markets for the farmers when the farm organizations were unable to go to the normal markets that they used to sell. Then in some instances, we were able to increase assets for farming. They were able to buy some water pumps and some of the storage material and tools for farming using a rice loan. If we look at the impact on the farm organizations, farm organizations were able to use rice to build goodwill between farm organizations and members, because most of the financial organizations were reluctant to lend, and there was no reserved fund that was available for farm organizations to address at a time where cash flow was decreased and people were not able to pay an interest and get a normal loan. So rice provided some space for the farmers to build the goodwill and cater to the needs of the farm organizations. Then negotiated other services such as insurance for loan beneficiaries. Some of the farm organizations were able to negotiate with SANASA insurance in order to cover in order to get a loan protection, which supported the farm organizations to take the risk of lending at a time when cash flows were not guaranteed to come. Then for farm organizations during the COVID time, RISE was able to cluster the farm organizations around products and build their social capital to engage in collective bargaining. Then we were also able to look into the market-oriented businesses because the farmers were, the farm organizations were able to motivate their members to start thinking about sustainable, agriculture at a time when all the markets and everything else has collapsed. The importance of organizing the farmers and looking at long-term risk manage agribusinesses. I think RISE provided an opportunity to have that kind of a platform to discuss about these issues and start thinking about market-oriented businesses with better risk management. So if you look at the challenges that we encountered when we were implementing the RISE loan, we implemented, RISE was introduced at a time when country was in a lockdown situation. Therefore, we were not able to use the normal ways of reaching farmers and introducing new projects. So we had to use the previous experiences and previously tested, existed networks. So fortunately, SANASA had that kind of a network. Therefore, we were able to administer RISE loan without having major difficulty. Then the second challenge was that farmers were reluctant to borrow short-term loans because they were not sure about the cash flow. And this issue was also, in addition to the COVID situation, Sri Lanka had a policy directive to ban all the fertilizer. Therefore, farmers were in a very uncertain situation as to whether they were able to really get a proper harvest. So they were not very, they were not motivated to borrow loans, especially at the short-term basis. So SANASA cooperatives therefore had to complement a rice loan with a longer term loan, giving assurance to the farmers that if they are unable to pay at a short term basis, if the harvest is not going to provide them capacity to repay the loans that they borrow, SANASA cooperatives were creating a new loan, or the extending the loan with their own funds, so they can finance the facilities to make sure that the farmers have a longer term kind of a security measure in case they fail to pay the loans. So that was a solution. Then the third challenge was lack of readily available data on farmland and production. And in order to lend a rice loan, there was a long set of data that had to be filled, but this data was not available at cooperative level. So monitoring and knowledge management specialists trained the farm leaders on the importance of MIS related data. Then lack of market facilities due to lockdown was another challenge. SANASA was able to introduce a distribution channel that SANASA created during the lockdown period in order to address this situation, which is SANASA Green Mart. And we were also able to connect through NIA network to other locally available markets. Next slide. When we look at the supports that we received from other partners, from the private sector companies, we received SANASA Insurance Corporation support. We received the support from SANASA Farm SNFOs, specifically the women SNFO and the other 4 regional based SNFOs. We received SANASA Green Mart in order to reach the market. Under the government ministries, we got the support of the extension services of the Department of Agrarian Services to help farm organizations to find alternative income crops to improve their cash flow. Then from NIA side, we provided easy and user-friendly simple loan agreements. We trained farm organizations on MIS to easily improve their data systems. Then from other organizations, SANASA Uttamavi helped to increase the outreach of women. Lessons learned: to implement a loan scheme such as a rice, we realized that it is important to select FOs who have been previously involved in this kind of short-term, programs that had to implement loan schemes in very tight schedules. So there needed to be a certain degree of innovation and understanding of data-driven and time frame-driven programs. So that was one lesson that we learned. Then training leaders and officers of farm organizations to operate digitally was another lesson that we learned, because when we started implementing and we wanted to introduce the programs to digital means because of the lockdown situation, we realized that very few farm organizations had the capacity to operate on digital basis. Fortunately now quite a lot of them have been trained, but initially we realized that there was a serious skill gap between the SNFOs and farm organizations. So this is one lesson learned. Then the loans needed to be simple and easily accessible. So some of the previous loan schemes that were available in some of the farm organizations and NIA and SNFOs were not user-friendly, because during the lockdown time, the loan products had to be very easily administered. It can't be complicated, and it has to be more or less a generic kind of a product. So this was another thing that we learned. So the way that we adopted, the lesson learned was that during this kind of situation, we have to provide a product that is close to a similar product that they had previously implemented. Therefore, they can easily adopt and implement it without having to change internal procedures and getting kind of policy approvals and other things. So if we can top up existing products, it's easier. Then loan repayment timeframes should be according to the crop cycle, was another thing that we learned. Then farm organizations should be given more flexibility to determine loan sizes. What was proposed by the farm organizations was that rather than having, one type of a product, if we can give a certain amount, basically is more flexibility with the fund, access to fund, farm organizations can be more flexible to determine the loan sizes as per the needs of the individual farmers. How practical this is during a lockdown situation is yet to be learned, but this is one lesson that we learned for the average farm organizations. So there is one takeaway point we thought after the discussion with the team from Sri Lanka, which is if emergency funds such as rice loans are introduced within sustainable agribusiness program, that farm organizations can and their members can benefit in a sustainable manner, it could be more resilient. Rather than providing, temporary loan to inject and support the, cash flow issue of the farmers, if such a cash flow injection can be, located in a longer term program such as APFP or FO4A, there can be more, sustainable and resilient agribusiness that can be created for the smallholder farmers. So this is one takeaway point. And since this actually happened through the, by coupling rice with APFP, rice beneficiaries are now clustered into longer term food production processes. Therefore, the impact of rice can be maintained in order to get a more resilient, agri income for the smallholder farmers. So that's basically it.